What brings you to the restaurant today? On the face of it, it's a pretty simple question, isn't it? But on this particular day, it stopped me in my tracks. It was the first time I'd met Sophie, a young lady who in a matter of seconds asked me the question that changed the way I think about creating exceptional experiences. You see, I was the restaurant's area manager, and in the moments after Sophie asked her killer question, which felt like forever, I had all these thoughts running through my head. Why she asked me that question? That's not what's in our training manual. And how do I even answer it in the first place? Thankfully, my brain clicked into gear though. Hey Sophie, I'm Dave. I don't think we've met before. I'm here for a profit review with Paul. Paul was Sophie's boss. And I'm here a little bit early, so I thought I'd grab some lunch. Hey Dave, Sophie replied. It's nice to meet you. I'll tell you what, I'm going to sit you at table 17. It'll be nice and quiet at this time of the day, and there's a plug socket for your laptop. Now at the time, I missed that small attention to detail. But as I sat eating lunch, I watched Sophie greet many people, asking them the same question she'd asked me. What brings you to the restaurant today? And every time she asked it, I kept wondering why she'd chosen that question and not what she'd been trained. So when Paul came over, I thought I'd explore it a little bit further. Hey Paul, before we dive into the profit review, let's have a chat about Sophie. Why? What's up, boss? Is everything okay? Sophie's our best performer. Everybody loves her. She's always mentioned by name in guest reviews. She's our best upseller without even trying. I said, that's brilliant, Paul. However, and I paused. And I waited a little while. And then the dawning realisation appeared on Paul's face. She asked you what brings you to the restaurant today, didn't she? And I just smiled. He said, I know. I keep telling her to follow a training. Well, now my curiosity was really getting the better of me. I'll tell you what, Paul, let me have a chat with Sophie when she goes on a break. A little while later, Sophie wanders over, and before I've even had a chance to say hello, she says, I know I asked you the wrong question when you came in earlier, Dave. I said it wasn't the wrong question, Sophie. It was just different. After all, I didn't want to feel like she was going to be getting into trouble. But I've seen you greet every guest, asking them the same question you asked me. I'm just interested to understand why. And what happened next blew my mind, because Sophie shared a story she could only tell by asking her question. About the two business people sat at a table for four so they could spread out, continuing their conversations over lunch and plugging their laptops in if needed. The group of friends that were going out to the cinema, who'd been sat by the salad bar for convenience, and whose tickets Sophie had asked the kitchen to bump up the order because they were short on time. Or the family out celebrating their little boy's birthday. Now there's a time for desserts all round, and Sophie had recommended them before they'd even ordered their main courses. And finally, the elderly couple, in the area for the first time, who got Sophie's recommendations on where to visit. These small attentions to detail could have only come from asking the right question. And Sophie finished by saying, I know it's my job to make people happy while they're with us. And by asking why they're visiting, it means I can tailor every experience. I want everybody coming back, wanting more and having a big smile on their face. Now at this point, I'm thinking, how can I clone Sophie and put her in every one of my restaurants because she's an absolute superstar? But then the reality hit and everything actually clicked into place. It was all about creating the right environment. An environment that empowers people. An environment that gives us all the flexibility to make a difference in people's lives. An environment where we all ask better questions. And psychologist Kurt Lewin captured this in his magic formula. That behaviour is a function of personality and environment. In other words, how we act isn't just about who we are, but it's where we find ourselves. Because on paper, Sophie was like any other team member. She'd been given the same training, she'd been given the same tools. But her behaviour stood out because she'd chosen not to stick to the script. She was shaping her environment around her. And by asking what brings you to the restaurant today, she wasn't defying a training, she was building on it. She was seeing past the standard greeting and tapping into a deeper human need, and that's to feel seen, understood and valued. And it was this insight that allowed her to create these exceptional experiences. And this is where Lewin's equation becomes powerful, because as people, whether it be parents, friends or business leaders, we can all shape the environments around us. Just think if we all created spaces where people felt empowered to ask better questions. Just think of the results we could all achieve. Lewin's work reminds us that exceptional experiences don't happen by chance though. They're a balance between people and the places they find themselves. But Sophie's story also illustrates another powerful idea, that of double loop thinking. And double loop thinking was developed in the 1970s by Chris Agiris. And it wants us to question our underlying beliefs, which are what drive our actions and ultimately our results. It wants us to ask if we're doing the right things, not just if we're doing things right. Because when Paul kept telling Sophie to follow a training, he was in single loop thinking mode. He was forcing the behaviour to fit the script, and I'd fallen into the same trap during my conversations earlier in the day. But Sophie wasn't being different for the sake of it. She was challenging the assumptions behind her training, and that's double loop thinking in action. Rather than focusing solely on improving processes, he wants us to question why those processes exist in the first place. He wants us to challenge our assumptions and change our way of thinking if we don't get the results that we desire. He wants us all to ask better questions of ourselves. How often do we just stick to the rule book when it comes to life, relationships, or business, without even questioning whether it's the right rule book in the first place? Just think what other assumptions we could all challenge. Take the parent whose teenager's not doing the jobs around the house. It might be their first reaction to simply ask, why aren't you doing it? And that's assuming that the child's just being defiant. Perhaps a better question might be, why are you finding it so challenging, and what can I do to help make it easier? I think we'd all be surprised what we might find out. Or at work, that colleague who's always missing deadlines. Our first instinct is to simply say, why do you keep missing the deadline? But that's assuming that personal inefficiency is the problem. Perhaps you should step back and ask, what are the barriers preventing you from delivering on time? And what can I do to help remove them? It moves the conversation from blame to problem solving, because double loop thinking is about creating long-term solutions, not short-term fixes. But it's also not about throwing that rule book out entirely. It's about recognising when those certain rules might need to change. You could think of it as bending, not breaking the rules. By asking what brings you to the restaurant today, Sophie was able to step into the guest's shoes and see behind the reason for the visit. And it was this that allowed her to create these tailored, memorable experiences. On that day, Sophie reminded me that progress comes from asking better questions, both of ourselves and others. But what does that mean for us? And where could we make a difference? I'd like to leave you with 3 things to consider. Number 1 is ask better questions. Sophie's simple question, what brings you to the restaurant today, was a small act with a powerful impact. Ask the questions that matter. Secondly, empower the environment. Create spaces where people can thrive, where they can think, act and grow beyond the script. And don't forget that includes our family and friends as well. And finally, challenge your assumptions. Don't ask if you're doing things right, ask if you're doing the right things. Because when I left the restaurant that day, I knew the magic wasn't in cloning Sophie, but it was in creating environments where people like her could thrive. Environments where they all asked better questions. So my final thought for you today is, how are you going to challenge yourselves to ask better questions? Thank you for listening.